I'd like to welcome in my next guest, Josh White, to the show. Looking forward to some great discussion with the Miami FSU series coming up. Josh, how's it going?
Everything's great, Chris. How you doing?
Good. Just to recap, kind of summarize where Miami's at right now. Ranked sixth in the D1 baseball poll, 9-4, won their last six games, 5-3 in the ACC. So that's just kind of like an overview of where Miami's at. They had that big 15-2 win over Florida Gulf Coast. And I guess there's a lot to get into, Josh, in terms of positions, lineups, some guys, how they're performing. But let's just start with where they're at right now at 9-4, the 6 game winning streak. Just what's your takeaway with where the team is right now?
Well, I think when you just kind of rewind for a moment, just to the start of the year, they got off to a great start, taking 2 or 3 from Florida, something they hadn't done in 6, 7 years, and they're able to pull off that series victory. And then the following weekend, maybe a little bit of a disappointment, losing 2 of 3 to Virginia Tech, and we've kind of seen that throughout the ACC. To start the year with teams that maybe shouldn't be winning, or teams that are going on the road and are taking 2 of 3 from some very talented home teams. And that's kind of been the norm in the ACC this year. But I don't know if that was motivating for Miami. I don't know what Gino said to the team, but whatever he said worked. Because you mentioned the 6 game win streak. They've rattled off 6 straight games after the Saturday game onward at NC State. And it seems like, the errors that they were having in the beginning of the season, are they completely gone? No, but are they mostly relieved? Yeah. Like they were having problems in the middle of their bullpen. A lot of that's been fixed. They were having problems in their lineup that, guys that you were used to seeing hit weren't hitting. And now it's started to turn around. Anthony Villar, I think, is a great example, who started 1 for 16. And since that, he's had a hit in every single game, and he's hitting over 400. And that's what you're used to seeing from this Miami team. And they've done that. They've made the routine plays on defense, which they hadn't done the first, 2 weekends or so. And I think those are all great signs. Now, granted, it's still only mid-March. There's still, a whole lot of baseball left to play. I got a text yesterday from someone saying, should I look at hotel rooms in Omaha in June? And I said, pump the brakes for a moment. It's March 18th, or I guess it was March 17th yesterday. They're playing well. They are on pace to make Omaha, but there's a lot of baseball left. Baseball's a crazy game. Anything can happen.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, there's a lot to get into. First off, I'll make sure I introduce you, last time with WVUM, but I just want to make sure everyone knows that you're also doing stuff for the ACC Network and you're doing a great job there too. So want to make sure we get some housekeeping done. Like I said, there's a lot to get to, and you touched on the pitching and some of the things in the lineup. I want to start right with the outfield, because against Florida Gulf Coast, Gabe Rivera gets his first start in right field. He made 11 starts there last year, kind of their regular right fielder. And it was only his third start of the season. He was the guy that I thought that I was hoping that would get in the lineup, because based on those power numbers that we've seen, his OPS numbers were good coming into the year. So he gets that start, hits the grand slam, first home run of the year. And again, 15-2. So there was a lot of things going right. Morales had 3 RBIs, Kristen Del Castillo, great to see Jose Azara get his first hit and knock in a couple runs as well. But with the outfield, basically what happened, the reason why Gabe kind of gets that start is because Tony Jenkins has been struggling quite a bit at the plate, just not getting on base, not getting hits, and he had that good performance against Florida. So he's in center field. They really like his defensive performances, but eventually they just kind of made that switch. And then Chad Bourne, his backup, has been out with a hamstring injury. This is his 4th straight game he's missed. And when I asked Gino about it, in that stretch, he just felt like they're being very cautious with him, and certainly they don't need to get him in there. But that's just kind of where things are at. And so they move Christian over to center. Where do you see the outfield right now? With Gabe, and one thing that Gino said after the game, he was happy that Gabe took advantage of the opportunity, and that's what he wants to see, and look forward to seeing him in there more. But what are you kind of seeing with the outfield, and include Jordan in that, Lala, with his improved play as well lately?
Well, there's obviously 3 outfield spots, and 2 of them, especially right now, are locked down. You mentioned Jordan Lala and Christian Del Castillo. There's no reason to take either guy out of the lineup now. They're both over 300. They both play good defense. I think Lala's on base percentage is above 500 right now. And for a leadoff guy, that's exactly what you wanted. I think he's gotten on base like 20 of the last 21 games dating back to last season. So that's exactly what you want from a leadoff guy. I think Christian Del Castillo, I think people were expecting him to be good. I don't think people were expecting him to be this good. And obviously the last name's Del Castillo, so he's got to be at least decent, and he's going to drive and run. So he's done that so far, to say the least. I think the disappointing player has been Tony Jenkins in that outfield, like you mentioned. He started 3 for 8 and hasn't had a hit since. So he hasn't had a hit since the second game of the year, and he's been in there for his defense. He races down every ball. He's kind of your patrolling center fielder, if you will, that gets to everything, has a pretty decent arm. But if you're going to hit under 100 at some point, it's going to be an opportunity for someone else. And you mentioned Gabe Rivera took advantage of that last night. The question becomes, will that be a thing moving forward? Because I think the big question with Gabe is his defense. I don't think anyone ever questions the power. There's plenty of power. The OPS has always been good. The home runs per at bat, which is a statistic a lot of people don't really look at all that often. I think for his career, that number is really high. It's towards the top in the ACC among active players. But it's the defense. Is he running the base as well? The little things that might not show up on stat sheets per se, that aren't showing up in an average or an OPS, that he needs to do right. And obviously when you hit a grand slam, it doesn't really matter as much. And when your team's winning 15-2, it doesn't really matter as much. And I think the other thing too is the way this Miami lineup is constructed, and this could be one of their weaknesses. Now, it hasn't been too big of a weakness to start the year, is there's a lot of lefties in the lineup, and you want to get some righties in there. Tony Jenkins is a right-handed bat. Gabe Rivera is a right-handed bat. So in Gino DeMari's world, you want balance. If in an ideal world, obviously he's going to play the best 9 guys, whether they hit lefty, righty, switch hitters. He doesn't really care. He just wants the best 9 guys on the field. But if Gabe Rivera is going to hit left-handed pitching, he's going to start against lefties. If he gets some starts against righties and he hits righties, I'm sure he's going to start. If you hit, you will be in the lineup. And I know Jim Morris used to say, I don't write the lineup, the players do. And like, yes, he physically writes the lineup, but to an extent, he makes a point. Who's ever performing is going to be in the lineup, and Gabe Rivera performed last night. It'll be interesting to see against Florida State if he gets a start or two.
And just looking at real quick at Florida State, it looks like they're going to probably start 2 lefties in their first 2 games of the series. The left, those 2 guys and the right-hander in that third game. It's the way it looks like it's going to shape up. So with Gabe, and certainly Josh, we've seen this with Coach DeMari about the defense-offense thing, and he definitely, just on his other moves he's making, he really prioritizes the defensive guys. They got Dominic Patelli at shortstop, another guy that's not hitting real well, but they like his defense so much. Jenkins was in there for quite a few starts. And then other guys too, you're starting to see, Alex Terrell getting pulled a little bit. You're seeing some at DH because CJ Kafis is a better defensive player. Raymond Gill's a guy that's, he's not swinging and he's not a great defensive player either. So he's having a tough time cracking the lineup, and he's another right-handed bat of those guys that you're looking at maybe could get going at some point, but it's tough. He's not getting that start with Raymond. Not getting the start, and when he's getting those pinch hit opportunities, he's just not able to take advantage of those 1 or 2 at bats he's getting late in games. But it's certainly interesting to see. And I think, with Rivera, now that he's in there, got to take advantage of it. I know, some of this stuff there's a lot of pressure when you get that opportunity. If you're a guy that's not going to get a string of 4, 5, 8 games in a row, like Rivera wasn't getting. So when you get that one, you got to take advantage of it. But I do expect them to be in there because I think they need those bats. And I'm kind of in the believer and kind of dealing with the bats and kind of dealing with guys that aren't great defensively, although I understand the other side of it, certainly. And Josh, if those top of the order guys or those big bats are really delivering, then you can kind of afford to have the defensive guys. So if Adrian Del Castillo's, really getting his average up, driving runs, Yohani Morales, if Alex Terrell gets going, you can kind of bank on those guys where you can kind of take some offense, defense stuff going.
Yeah, yeah, Chris, I think you make a great point there, is that you have to find the balance between the two. Right. You want guys that are going to produce runs, but you also need to make sure that you're not making 3 or 4 errors a game. You make 3 or 4 errors a game, your run total is going to have to move from, let's say, 5 or 6 to 8 or 9 in order to win a game. And I think Gino's trying to find that balance of guys like Dominic Patelli, who at one point he was hitting over 300. It's come down a little bit, and I think the expectation is for him to hit, somewhere in the 200s. But if he makes, I don't know, if his fielding percentage is 990, you won't really care at shortstop, and as long as he hits his weight. And it's kind of the same thing with Tony Jenkins. If you have 7 guys that are hitting, if 8 and 9 aren't producing as much, it's as long as they don't really make errors, at the end of the day, they're doing their job. And I think that's something that gets lost. And if they're able to do that, great. Now in 2021, there's so much depth on this Miami Hurricanes baseball team. If you're not hitting, I'm sure Gino can try and plug someone else in. And again, the first few weeks it didn't work. There were really only 4 or 5 guys that were hitting. And now it seems like the lineup's starting to pick up a little bit, where guys are coming off the bench, and Gabe Rivera's the latest example of a guy gets his opportunity, takes advantage, and now he might make another start or 2 this weekend.
And then with Tony Jenkins, the thing about him, it's his average is so low, and we saw strides last year. I know it was only the 16 games the team played, but he hit 300, hit a home run. He was picking things up and getting on base. So we'll see how Tony does it, but it's going to be tough. Just they've got other guys that they can go to. Moving on to the infield, let's talk with Morales. once again, we both had high expectations for him this year. Not disappointing at all at the plate. He's crushing pitching, particularly left-handed pitching, and that's great to see for a right-handed bat because once again they need that right-handed bat. With Morales, what's kind of impressing you about him so far?
He's 18 or 19 years old, and he looks like he's been playing college baseball for 3 or 4 seasons. He seems like he's a redshirt senior at the plate. Nothing phases him at the plate at all. He misses a pitch, it's right back, same approach. He's not a guy, at least not yet, and I think you'll see it maybe in a year or two when he fills out a little more. But like I was taking photos at one of the games, and I saw him, and I was like, oh my, this kid's bigger than I thought he was. And he's listed at, I think, 6'3", $180, $190. It's like, okay, like, yeah, he's big, but like you see him and he looks like a Major League Baseball player. And again, this is an 18 or 19-year-old young man who still has plenty of growth and development to do. So I've just been impressed by his Major League body, if you will. And his approach to the plate is so beyond his years. I think you can kind of talk about Miami the last few years of guys who have been like that. And Adrian Del Castillo is in the same boat, and now he's a projected first round pick. You look at guys that as true freshmen that just get it. They're at the plate and they get it. It's strike zone awareness. It's fouling pitches off. It's not trying to hit a home run every swing, just trying to go gap to gap, going with the pitch. And that's what Yohandy Morales does. The home runs will come. He's a big kid. It was the same thing with Adrian Del Castillo as a freshman. A lot of people are like, oh, is this guy going to hit home runs? And I think he finished his freshman year with 12 or 13 home runs. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a similar number from Morales. He's not a guy that lives and dies with the long ball, but they're going to come often. And he's been Miami's best hitter so far through the first, 13 games.
One of the things I like about Morales, and just real quick, my times in covering the Marlins, Don Mattingly, this always stood out to me during a pregame talk about basically rookies and just saying, guys just get it immediately. Guys that are going to be good are good immediately. And I thought that was an interesting take. And maybe we're seeing that with Morales. And certainly guys develop in whether major leagues from the rookie season on and freshman year in college. But the point is, those guys that are going to be studs really do well early. And I think that it just always stuck with me early on. And certainly as when he was a player, he did that. But with Morales, the thing that, one thing that I really like is his double ability. And we saw it again. He's done this a couple times where he's smacking the gaps and then the balls just roll into the wall. I mean, he's hitting these balls really hard. And I think that's a great sign. I've talked about this a number of times. I really love the double in baseball and for hitters. And he's just that guy that's really driving the ball. And I think he can hit both gaps equally well. And I think it's just going to continue. Like you said, I don't see, maybe he's going to hit a slump here and there, but I expect him to, they've plugged him into that 3 hole. And, his strikeouts are fine. Like it's nothing crazy when he strikes out. And like you said, he just kind of misses a pitch here or there. And also too, I mean, the exciting part about this is with him, Alejandro Rosario, and then Victor Mederos. These guys were all top 10 players in the state coming into Miami, top 10 players in the ACC, and they're all delivering. And it's going to be exciting to watch them throughout their career. So that's exciting. Another guy I want to talk about, there's other guys in the infield. Certainly we can talk about Terrell with his home runs. Good to see him get one, but I know he's not really continued that momentum. But Carlos Perez is a guy, he's jumped ahead of Jared Thomas as that backup catcher role. He started the last 2 midweek games. He was a guy not talked about that like these other freshmen, even Chad Bourne. But Carlos was one of those top regarded catchers in coming in. I remember watching him in high school, good player. So he's moved ahead of Jared Thomas in the depth chart. What do you see with Carlos and then just maybe the importance of having that backup catcher role where you can kind of spell Adrian every now and again?
Yeah, I think it's huge to have that backup catcher, especially in midweek games. And we've seen Gino do that you're going to have Adrian Del Castillo in your lineup. It's just, where is he going to be playing? And you try and get him off his feet if you can on a midweek. And we've seen that the last, 2 midweeks where Del's been the DH. But yeah, it's been interesting to see that Carlos Perez, the midweek catcher, not Jared Thomas. There were a lot of high hopes for Jared Thomas, and there's still plenty of time for Jared Thomas to be the player that they're expecting. But I think Carlos Perez is in the lineup because of his glove. I think his defensive ability as a freshman at catcher, that's a tough position to handle as a true freshman, and he's handling it really well. There's a lot of balls that he's blocked in the dirt. Again, you're not calling the game like you might be at the major league level or anything like that. But just his ability to, you don't notice a difference between Adrian Del Castillo and Carlos Perez catching. And I think that's the big thing, that Adrian Del Castillo is a projected, top 10 pick for both his bat and his glove. Don't get me wrong. It's not just the glove or anything like that. But Carlos Perez goes in there and he doesn't skip a beat defensively from what Miami's used to. And I think that's big because again, that's something that doesn't show up on the stat sheet. We're not talking average or home runs or whatever it might be, but the ability to catch a pitcher and keep them in control, especially when, again, a midweek starter who's been Jake Garland, and I'm sure we'll get into that momentarily of how good he's been, that again, the stats for Jake Garland will be there, but the catcher gets some credit too, whether it's almost one of those advanced analytics talk about framing and things like that, and working with your pitcher that don't show up in stats. But I think Carlos Perez gets a lot of credit in that. And I think, he was overmatched in the beginning in some spot at bats here and there, and he's starting to figure it out a little bit. But you're probably looking at Miami's future catcher after Adrian Del Castillo leaves. It's going to be a competition between him and Jared Thomas. And as of March 18th, 2021, Carlos Perez has the upper hand. And again, things can change, but right now he's done nothing to take himself out of that role as the midweek catcher.
And just a note, and certainly one of the things with you mentioned the defensive ability in college baseball. Josh, you watch a lot of college baseball. Look, not all catchers are fielding the balls, or even the ones that go in the dirt. I mean, we've already seen some of these games. Other teams' catchers really struggling with wild pitches, pass balls. So to say that it is a statement. It's not like the major leagues where you're getting really good defensive play from the catcher. You don't really notice him as much. But in college baseball, it's not always like that. Jake Garland, yes, I want to talk about him. He's the guy that got that nod. It kind of felt like it was trending in that direction as a number 4 starter. He's made 2 starts there in the midweek game. The big thing with Jake, he admits not a strikeout guy, but he's getting ground balls. I think 14 yesterday in his start, 14 of the 21 outs from ground balls. It's a great stat for him, keeping the ball down. He's pitching well, and it's important. And the one thing that we're going to be watching, the key for that midweek guy, once you stay in that role, is the way it works, the schedule, you're going to see these teams again. So he's got another start again. He's already faced FAU. He's going to face them again next time. So that adjustment for the midweek starter is a bit of an adjustment. But yeah, with Jake, what do you see from him? And also too, Damari and Coach Ardiaga, they've got options. So if Jake struggled early, they didn't need to stick with him at that start. But the way it's looking, he's going to stay in there, and he's doing well. And just your thoughts on Jake so far.
Yeah, his 2 starts, he's been fabulous. Last night, he made 1 bad pitch, and it was a mistake, and it was a home run. He left the ball up. He's not a guy that's going to, blow velocity by you. And he's pitched to his game. He's kept the ball low, and when he keeps the ball low, he's got a good sinking fastball, and it just gets pounded right into the ground. And I think you saw against FAU, it was his changeup that was really, really good and kept the FAU hitters off balance. Last night against FGCU, it was his fastball. And he's going to get so many ground ball outs when he keeps that ball low. So the thing for him is entirely command. The fastball might touch 92 or so, but that's about it. If he keeps that ball low, and I think that's the other thing, we were talking about defense momentarily, a little while back. And that's the big thing, is if you're going to have a pitcher like Jake Garland on the mound, you need guys that can handle those ground balls. And Dominic Patelli at shortstop, he might only, be hitting 220 or so right now, but if he's going to make those routine plays, you need that. Last night it was Alex Stroud at first, and he was fine at first base. We've seen him struggle, but I wouldn't be surprised in some games if Miami feels that, the pitching matchup makes sense. Maybe it's a righty on the mound and they want CJ Kafis in there. I would not be surprised at that either, because Jake Garland is not a strikeout pitcher. And he said that himself. He's going to get the ball's going to be put in play, and his defense needs to go to work. And we saw it last night. I think right now he's the midweek guy, and I don't think anyone is close from taking that from him. The interesting thing to me will be how long/short is Daniel Fetterman's leash from here on out, given how well Jake Garland has pitched. I don't think there was any question about it if Jake Garland had struggled in the midweek, that Fetterman was just going to keep one of those weekend spots. But if Garland is pitching this well, that comes into question. Now, to me, a lot of people are like, okay, why don't we switch them? It's an easy swap that fans could see. To me, what I might do, and then this is maybe unconventional and something Miami hasn't done, why not split the starts between the 2 of them? Both of them start Wednesday and Sunday, and they both take 3 innings each. That way you're eliminating one of those things. Again, it's an out-of-the-box thinking type of move, but they don't face each lineup, 3 times, which has been a problem for some of Miami's pitching staff this year, that they're only facing them 1 time through, maybe starting into the second time through the order, and then you kind of piggyback off each other, 2-3 innings, and then your bullpen gets some work, and that might be another way to eat up an inning. It's just the thought that maybe, hey, this could work. Jake Garland's given them 6 and 7 innings beautifully, and that's worked for midweek games. But if Fetterman continues to struggle on Sunday, I wouldn't be surprised to see some change. I don't know if it's going to be a straight swap, if they're going to try and combine, the 2 of them over those days, but it's something to look out for.
And with Fetterman, so he gets his start skipped in that Wake Forest Sunday. So he's going to have an extra week to prepare, and it'll be interesting to see. And without question, so Miami's 0-3 on Fetterman starts, 9-1 when the other three start. So that's just kind of a thing that I certainly will expect Gino and JD to determine or to pay attention to. As Daniel kind of moves along, and they've already made one move with moving him back in the rotation. So they're already on that position. So we'll see, and certainly competition. They've always talked about it. So we'll see how that goes out. So Florida State 7-6. They've won 3 of the last 4, 4-5 in the ACC. Their last win was against Florida this week. And just, they've got a couple guys, some guys that can hit. Matthew Nelson's off to a good start. Robbie Martin, Tyler Martin, those guys are hitting. Touched on their pitching, so they're going to go 2 lefties and a righty, it looks like. Finish there with Connor Grady on Sunday, it looks like. And Connor's a guy that we've seen a lot of over the years. Just kind of some keys for the series. And obviously you can jump in with Alejandro Rosario pitching lights out, and Victor Medeiros continuing to show signs with those first 2 guys, those true freshmen there starting the first 2 games.
Yeah, Florida State from a record perspective at 7-6 doesn't jump off the page, but I think when you look at who they've beaten, it kind of just flashed a little more. They've won 5 games already. 5 of those 7 wins have come against top 20 teams, and I think that's the big thing. You mentioned the win against Florida in the midweek, and again, baseball's a crazy sport where anyone can beat anyone on any given day. But I think Florida State has a couple really nice pieces. They're on a team that hits for average. I think Tyler Martin's the only guy over 300 right now. But Robbie Martin and Matthew Nelson have been RBI machines so far. Nelson's contributed that power. And again, that's a catcher in the ACC that there seems like there's a few of them that this year that are pretty good. And Nelson's another one that, he's a guy that's known more for his defense. And this year he's put the offense together. I really like what Florida State has with Parker Messick. I think he's been pretty reliable in their rotation. I think their pitching is where Miami might be able to take advantage. I think their bullpen is deep, but they don't have necessarily that wipeout guy like, Carson Palmquist, who comes in the game and it's almost over. Jonas Scalaro has been pretty good. Chase Haney, who's a veteran, has been pretty solid for them as well. But they don't have a guy that comes in the game and kind of, takes it out of you offensively. So I think the key for Miami might be getting to that bullpen. And we've seen Miami approach that a few different ways this season. We've seen the, completely – we're going to be patient. We're going to drive up the pitch count, that approach. We've seen we're going to be really aggressive and try and get them out of the game in 50 pitches after giving up 6 runs. So it'll be interesting to see in that regard what Miami's approach to the plate is against the Florida State pitching staff. That's been really good this year. And then for Miami, you mentioned Alejandro Rosario and Victor Medeiros. Rosario has been not just the best pitcher on Miami's staff in their rotation, but he's been one of the best pitchers in the ACC. And what he's done at Marklight Field too. I don't know if it's a coincidence that he's pitching at home or what it is. He's given up, I think, 3 hits in 14 innings or something absurd. He's been lights out on that Marklight mound. He has been so good. And to me, it doesn't matter what day you pitch in the weekend because you're facing the same team. But there's something about Friday night that everyone loves to talk about it. And he's embodied everything about a Friday night starter so far. Gets you off on the right foot. And things like that. The thing to me that I'm looking for, and it's maybe not what you'd normally see because it's still in a pandemic and all of that and shortened crowds, is sometimes the emotion in a Miami-Florida State game could, kind of get the best of a freshman. But that probably won't be a factor per se. There's only going to be 650 fans. I'm sure he'll be fired up. I'm sure his teammates will be fired up. Florida State will be fired up. But I think he's shown nothing but excellent signs so far this year. And Victor Medeiros has been interesting too, because with Medeiros, you're seeing a guy that maybe gives up a run early on and then makes that adjustment. And that's a sign of a really, really good pitcher. Is, usually they say if you can score against a pitcher in the first inning, that might be your best chance, because other than that, they're going to put it together. And I think Medeiros has done that where, the first time around the order, that first inning, he might give up a run. Other than that, the rest of that time and the second time through the lineup, you're not getting anything. And he's been nails in that regard. And then in his last start, just kind of faded a little bit towards the end of his start. But if they get a good start from Rosario on Friday, they have the bullpen behind Medeiros and Fetterman. I think Miami should be fine this weekend.
And just a quick note on Medeiros. I think all 4 of his starts, he's been pulled in the inning. I'd like to see him finish an inning, finish his outing on a strong note. So just, once again, that's kind of a freshman thing, but just to get through an inning. So we'll see for that. Josh, I have a question for you about baseball. You've been to a lot of parks covering the Miami Hurricanes, also covering baseball at the Cape Cod Baseball League. I'm curious about your go-to baseball food that you enjoy at a stadium, either as a fan, a broadcaster, whatever it might be. What's a go-to food for you?
Well, obviously, Mark Light Field, you have to go Mark Light milkshake. That's a given. Haven't had one this year actually, for what that's worth. I normally would go one opening day, and then I'd try and go on occasional Sundays, depending on the Sunday. You know, if you go to the ballpark every day, you can't have a milkshake every day. You're not going to look so good. But I haven't had a milkshake yet, so that's the go-to at Mark Light. Also a big chicken tender and fries guy at Mark Light Field. They're really, really good. But general ballpark food, when I was a kid, I would say helmet cup ice cream. I used to have a collection of the different helmet cups. You know, you rinse them out in the bathroom, you bring them home. I don't know. That might be really it. I used to, as a kid, I was a big lemonade guy as a kid too. I know it's not a food, it's a beverage, but I would say those are the three items: a milkshake, chicken tenders and fries, and lemonade. I know it's kind of basic and boring, but those
No,
would
it's
be
great. The helmet Sundays classic. I still have
yeah.
the helmets that from when I was a kid. I still have them, and I've picked up a few since then. But yeah, my go to those are great ones. And my go to is I always have to go with the hot dog with mustard only. That whether that's even sometimes at home if I'm watching a game, really into it. But yeah, definitely at a ballpark. That's got to be my go to. But the helmet Sunday is classic. I'm glad it's still around. And anytime you could go with those other ones, the lemonades those are always good too. And the fries, chicken tenders. Those are always good. And obviously the milkshake. I figured that was going to come up. You're certainly a
It
huge fan.
had to. And I had a friend growing up that would take those helmet Sunday cups, they'd rinse them out, and their mom used them as like mac and cheese bowls at home. It was very inventive. I liked that. I was like, oh, this is a good idea. So, you take your Kraft mac and cheese, you then eat it in the helmet cup. And I was like, oh, this is cool.
That's great. So that's a great way to end it, Josh. Big series coming up. I appreciate you joining me. This is great to talk about the Hurricanes. Looking forward to doing this more this season. Definitely stay locked into InsideTheU.com and definitely follow anything that Josh is doing with his reporting and broadcasting. So, Josh, I'll talk to you later, man.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris.
See you.